Welcome to the 3DownNation podcast. I'm John Hodge, joined by JC the Cheese Abbott. Cheese, how you smelling today?
Such a strange question to open a podcast. I hope I'm smelling good. I haven't confirmed that with anybody.
Smelling good as cheese, though, can mean many things. It could mean that you smell appetizing, right? You smell nice, you smell fresh, or it can mean you smell absolutely ripe, right? It depends on what kind of cheese you like.
I don't think our fans want to imagine what I smell like, or at least I hope they don't. Actually, I would prefer that they didn't, because if we got a bunch of people out here listening to the podcast, fantasizing about what I smell like, I might be a little concerned the next time I show up in public.
Well, hey, I don't want to shame any of our listeners who may or may not be imagining the way that you smell. I know I'm smelling good because last night I did one of those face masks that, you put on and moisturizes your skin. I never really done one before, and my wife had an extra one, so I said, throw it on me. And my skin is looking youthful. It's looking full. It's looking beautiful. And I'm seeing there are wrinkles I've had since I swear I was 12 that have disappeared. So these face masks, they're great. I would highly recommend them to anybody who wants to look less middle-aged and less haggard.
Is this one of those ones that you put on and take off, or was this a peeling second skin situation?
It was like you put it on for 5 minutes and then you take it off. Like it wasn't a peeling kind of vibe.
See,
Though
those
I
are the
did
best
feel
ones, though.
like
Because then you can pretend to be a lizard.
No, I didn't do the lizard thing, but I did feel like maybe the next time I do one, I'll like cut it in half so I can use it twice, because the bottom half did not get a lot of contact with the skin. So I think maybe next time I'll cut it in half, do top half, and then I'll flip the bottom half over and do it again on the top, like a double face mask, because the face masks don't do anything on the bottom half of my face. They just kind of awkwardly rest, I've learned, on top of the beard, which is neither here nor there. Maybe it's good to moisturize the beard. I don't know.
Well, I think it is good to moisturize the beard, but typically there are oils and things for that. But I bet those smell pretty nice, if you want to imagine what John Hodge smells like.
They do smell nice. They do smell nice, the beard oils and stuff. So anyways, let's stop talking about smelling. Let's get into the show. Today we're discussing CFL teams making their final cuts.
A quarterback switch in Ottawa.
Kenny Lawler getting paid.
The Stampeders bringing back a defensive difference maker.
The Saskatchewan Roughriders shiny new bling.
And someone feeling nicey about the BC Lions. But first, the Canadian Football League announced a new 6-year media rights deal on Thursday, splitting the league's domestic broadcast rights for the first time since 2008. Beginning in 2027, online streaming platform DAZN will be the home of Saturday Night Football, with fans needing to pay to view 21 regular season games and 2 playoff contests on the platform. Bell Media will continue to air the remaining games on TSN and or CTV, as well as in French on RDS. YouTube is also on board as a premium platform partner, which will see them host certain exclusive content. While CFL Commissioner Stuart Johnston has not revealed the financial details of the agreement, he confirmed to 3DownNation's Justin Dunk that it represented, quote, a significant increase, unquote, for the league in terms of revenue. Is this a good deal for the league? And what does it mean for fans?
I think it's a great deal for the league, and I actually think it's a good deal for fans too. We'll get into that in a bit. My sources have indicated like this deal's been reported at around $500 million. My sources have revealed it's a little bit lower than that, though of course nothing has been officially confirmed or denied by the Canadian Football League beyond what Johnston told us, is that it's a significant raise, right? As you astutely laid out, JC. Even though it might be a little bit lower, like I've heard 430 to 450 kind of thrown out. I've also heard that it's not necessarily the same exact amount of money over the course of the deal per year. It kind of ramps up. So, instead of, it's 500 million divided evenly by 6 years, the amount might be lower in year 1 and then slowly work its way up to being highest in year 6, which would make sense if you're Bell Media. It makes sense if you're DAZN and you're getting further and further into this deal. But let's talk about what it means for the league. What it means for the league is significantly more money, right? And this league needs to grow revenue. We've talked about expansion on this podcast many times. The best way for this league to increase revenue is expansion, and the best way to do expansion is to increase revenue, right? It's a catch-22. It's a two-edged sword. And so by dramatically increasing your rights, your broadcasting rights revenue, I believe that that will help the goal of expansion. I believe it will help some of the teams that like to paint themselves as have-nots. And the reason I say that is because when you look at the stadiums in recent years, at least in Ottawa and Edmonton and Toronto, it's easy to gather these teams are losing money. We also know that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and Saskatchewan Roughriders do make money. They are profitable. They're publicly owned. We get to see their books. The league's other teams, I think, sometimes like to pretend that they don't have any money and they're losing money hand over fist when in reality they are breaking even or possibly even making money. Again, we don't know that. That's my speculation. But it should be noted that Ryan Ballantyne, our local reporter in Calgary, posed that very question to Stampeders president Jay McNeil. Will this new deal make you guys profitable? He chose not to answer that, though he did, and of course I'm paraphrasing here, say something to the effect of, but it will obviously have a substantial positive financial impact on us and other teams. So a bit of an answer, a bit of a non-answer too there. We also did pose that question. Justin Dunk asked Stuart Johnston, is it fact or fiction that only two teams make money? He also decided not to answer that. So we're not getting a lot of transparency, which is kind of unfortunate. But, you know, if you are one of those middling teams, the Stampeders, the BC Lions, the Montreal Alouettes, right? Does an extra, let's say, roughly $3 million a year in your coffers mean profitability? I believe the answer is if not, you got to get there, right? Like if you've got over 22, and in some cases, the BC Lions averaged over 25,000 fans last year, you've got to be making money at some point, right? This is a substantial increase. And the other part of this that I love, JC, and I'll give you a chance to pop in a second, but it increases the exposure of the Canadian Football League, right? One of the reasons why I liked this Toronto Argonauts Bills partnership, as much as some other people have clowned on it, which is fine, that's their right, is if you are a skeptical, 20 or 30 something year old man, and the reason I picked that demographic is that when you look at the actual research that's been done, the polling that's been done on the general population of this country relative to CFL fandom, that is the demographic that the CFL has really missed out on. It's young men. And young men in this country overwhelmingly, and the research shows this over and over again, watch the NFL, right? They watch the NFL, they see the CFL as, a second-rate league, not worth watching. It's oh, that's my grandfather's league. I'm watching the NFL. And when you put the Argonauts and the Bills, right, in the same location optically, I think that not only helps legitimize the product of the Canadian Football League in the eyes of those doubters, those cynics, but it also gets you more eyeballs, period. And I think that's exactly what this deal with DAZN does. It puts you, and DAZN heavily features the NFL, it features college football. If you are a football fan or a sports fan, as many young men are, and you're turning on DAZN, and many of them subscribe to DAZN, if you haven't had the TSN app on your television or your phone, for instance, you maybe haven't seen a commercial for the CFL, a CFL game, anything in years. And it's easy to see why maybe over time that idea that the CFL is irrelevant, it's a second-rate league, can start to kind of permeate your thinking, right? Oh, yeah, I never see anything about the CFL. I don't see CFL plays. I don't see CFL players. I'm just an NFL college guy. Well, when this deal was announced, DAZN on its very front page of its app had a big, really beautifully done CFL graphic with Nathan Rourke and Brady Oliveira and a bunch of the faces of this league on there. And so I think not only are you getting more exposure beyond just TSN, but you're also hitting that really important demographic, kind of a lost generation, so to speak, of people who don't tune into the CFL because they either don't know what's going on or they don't respect the league. And again, I'm not saying I agree with any of those viewpoints of those young folks. I'm just trying to illustrate why I think the CFL did this. So usually when you maximize your exposure, you don't maximize your dollars. And if you try to maximize your dollars, you don't maximize your eyeballs. And I thought the CFL did a really good job here of having its cake and eating it too. Stuart Johnston was brought in to nail this media rights deal, and I think he hit a grand slam.
Agree with you, Hodge. I do not understand any of the people who are criticizing this deal or saying that it's not good for the Canadian Football League. I could hardly conceive of a better deal for the Canadian Football League in terms of its structure. And I'll tell you why. DAZN, as a streaming platform, allows you to reach an international marketplace. It allows you to reach the exact demographic that you need, that you laid out, which is young men. Those are overwhelmingly the largest subscriber group on DAZN, and there are over 20 million subscribers on the platform. And it allows you to generate extra revenue, right? By splitting up your broadcast platform, and creates incentive to compete and improve those broadcasts in the marketplace. TSN's exclusivity has been wonderful for the league in some ways because TSN has invested into the product. They've made it their own. They've made it a staple. But it has come at the cost, particularly in recent years, of innovation. I think everyone can admit that. There is a certain level of stagnation to the TSN broadcasts, to how they present the league. And the fact that DAZN is going to come in here and have their own broadcast crew, their own pre and post game shows, their own exclusive CFL content, they're going to tell stories in their own unique way, is going to force TSN to up their game as well. And that's going to be better for the league overall. It's going to mean more CFL content out there to attract people. And no, you're not going to get the casual channel flipping viewers, but you are going to get the people who go to DAZN specifically because they sign up for NFL Game Pass. And I think those are just as valuable in terms of a passive audience for the league. If you can get some of those people to take a shot at a CFL game or to engage in some of this content, whether that's domestically or internationally, because DAZN will be carrying this in over 200 international markets as well. On the monetary side, I know that there are people upset because this puts a paywall in front of games. And if you are genuinely a person for whom, a few extra bucks a month is not feasible, like it's the difference between life and death for you, my heart goes out to you. I'm deeply sympathetic. Nobody should be in that situation. But the priority should not be CFL football at that point. For most people, a DAZN subscription is not going to break the bank. It's $25 a month under the current format. We don't know if there'll be a reduced or specified CFL version of that subscription. That's entirely possible. The company is still deciding on it. So it may be less than $25 a month. But what you're getting for that is 4 games. So $6.25 a game. That is less than a grande coffee at Starbucks. Literally. It's less than a cheeseburger at McDonald's. It's certainly less than buying a CFL ticket. And to me, I do not understand for the life of me, if you are a fan and a supporter of this league, and you talk about the need for it to grow and have success and thrive and earn revenue and pay the players better money, that you wouldn't support it. Because ultimately, the money comes from somewhere and it comes from you. Now, if that's just not something you're interested in, that's okay. You don't have to like the league this much, right? But I think anyone who genuinely thinks that they are a fan of the CFL or feels a kinship to this league, if they balk at the idea of playing $6.25 to watch a game, you got to turn in your fan card.
I mean, look, I think something that maybe some fans have lost some perspective on is like, we're talking about 1 game a week, right? And I think actually the league was really smart to do this. So, okay, our 7 Eastern Saturday night game is always on DAZN, and every other game is always on TSN, right? That makes it super easy to set your calendar for the weekend. If you do not want to get DAZN, You know exactly which games are available to you through whether it's traditional television, the TSN app, however you get your TSN games. Normally, you can do that easily, peasily, done. Lemon squeezy. It's easy, right? CFL fans have been doing this for 20 years. And then if you do want to get to zone, you know which game each week you flip over, right? There are some leagues, and there's been, I think, some very warranted criticism of the NBA in this regard, NHL, where it's like you go get out your calendar and you're like, okay, we're on TNT on Tuesday, and then Thursday we're on Amazon Prime, and then Saturday we're on the Canadian Tire streaming app. What? Canadian Tire has a streaming app? And then Sunday it's just being shown at my friend George's house. They're just showing it at George's house. We have to go to George's. If we get there before 3 o'clock, we get a free hot dog. If we get there after 3 o'clock, we can't watch the game because it's blocked in the geolocation. We have to go to Jordan's apartment, right? Like it's literally that bad. I'm being facetious, obviously, but it's bad in some other markets. Here, it's like there's two options and you don't have to get the second one if you don't want to. And I'll remind fans, if you're someone who wants to watch all 81 regular season games, then fair enough. If you really, really don't want to get to zone, I can understand to an extent why you're upset by this. But let's remember, if assuming they rotate the teams pretty regularly, your favorite team, whatever it is in the Canadian Football League, will probably only hit that 7 p.m. Eastern time Saturday slot 4, maybe 5 times over the course of the season. And of those 4 or 5 games, it stands to reason that 2 or 3 would be home games. So if you're somebody who goes to all the games and, that means like what? We're talking DAZN is going to cost you 2 or 3 times that you watch your favorite team. In which case, you can get the subscription, or you can go over to a friend's house who has the subscription, or you can just listen to it on the radio, right? The radio is a great way to consume a football game. Even if you can't see all the pictures, you can watch it. And then, by the way, I've seen kind of mixed things on this YouTube partnership, but it does seem like there's a chance that they will have all the games on YouTube like 24 hours after the streaming is done, in which case you can then watch it on delay for free, potentially. Again, don't hold me to that. I'm not saying that's guaranteed. We've, again, asked some questions about this YouTube stuff, heard some kind of conflicting things. But regardless, my point is, if you're a diehard fan, it's not a huge expense. And even if you don't want to pay the money, you can still see, we're talking of your team's 18 regular season games, you can still see 15 or 16 the traditional, usual way, either on TSN or going to the stadium. And then playoffs, it said TSN will have 6 of the playoff games starting in 2027. DAZN will have 2, and that's not in counting the Grey Cup. Grey Cup is still on TSN, as well as CTV and Crave and a few other streaming options. So again, I understand to an extent why this is tough. And look, I think many CFL fans, right? You want to call them the old school fans, the traditional fans, whatever. I think there are times over the last year with all the changes that have happened to the league where they've been disrespected to an extent, right? It's like, oh, only old, losers don't like this. And it's like, well, actually, no, like moving the goalposts and shortening the field do meaningfully change the game. Like the CFL, as we know it, is not going to be the CFL that we see on the field in 2027. Is it going to change literally everything? No, but it's meaningfully changing the game. It is. I have some sympathy to that. This is one of those changes where I'm like, okay, like we can move past this, right? And if you're not a technologically sound person, then I guarantee you have a nephew or a grandson or a niece or a granddaughter or whoever can come and help you sign up for DAZN. It'll probably take them 5 minutes, right? We can get past the technology side of it too. And again, if you don't care about DAZN, just listen to it on the radio. Like it's not that big of a deal. So I don't think that this is something to smash the panic button over if you're a CFL fan. I think it shows that lots of legitimate industry leaders are interested in the rights to this league, and that is only going to help this league get bigger, get better. The other angle, you touched on it a little bit, JC, but having competing partners, right? I think TSN's broadcasts improved a lot in 2025 after feeling kind of stagnant, right? I think there was some new leadership there that took some new initiatives, tried some new stuff, and a lot of it people really liked. Having active players on the panel seemed to go over really well. I thought a lot of the guys who got opportunities to do that did great. Zach Collaros did great. Wynton McManus did really well. I thought Stavros Katsantonis did really well, to name a few. I think Davaris Daniels was on there, did really well. I remember that. I believe that's going to continue, by the way, in 2026. But I know that the last thing TSN wants is after the first DAZN game with all of its new score bug and the new production, the new personalities, everything. The last thing TSN's going to want is to wake up the next day and go, oh, we've scrolled social media and all the CFL fans agree that DAZN's production's way better than ours, right? Like that's the last thing you want. And so what I think that's going to do is it's going to force TSN to up their level again, right? Even more content, even more investment, even better graphics, even better segments, all these things. So if you're the league, you've maximized your dollar, you've maximized your exposure, you still only have your games in 2 different places. It's not 20, right? It's only 2. That's still not that hard for fans to follow. And you've also potentially now created a strong incentive for your partners to do even better work on your behalf. Like, to me, again, this is a grand slam for the CFL. Stuart Johnston, in my opinion, navigated this perfectly. And we have been critical of Stu, right? And I think some of it has been very warranted. I think some of the messaging hasn't been great from him at times. I think the 2027 changes, again, are largely unneeded. And I think some of them will make the game less interesting. But this is something that he has absolutely nailed. And I give him an A+. I really do. I understand, again, a little bit of the fan. Yeah, we can figure it out. It's a year from now. It's one app, one place. And if you don't want to pay, you're only missing 2 or 3 games from your favorite team. Like, I think we can get over that. I think we can move past that, especially considering all of the pluses that this means for the Canadian Football League.
And to be clear, if the league had completely cut out TSN and DAZN exclusively to DAZN as their partner, I would not have been in favor of that deal, because I do believe that there is importance still in sports to be on linear TV, where you can drive casual viewership and people can have it on at the bar or whatever it may be. I think you can see the reasoning behind that in something like the Apple TV deal with MLS, which, while being incredibly lucrative, has been a disaster in terms of viewership for that league. But the CFL is getting the best of both worlds here. They're getting the influx of cash, they're getting exposure to a new marketplace, and they're going to get more invested fans on DAZN versus casual viewers on TSN. And I think that is an important difference in the metrics as well. You also get something on a streaming platform, which is the actual data, right? People are subscribing to this. Their viewership preferences. You can tailor ads to them. There are other revenue opportunities that way for both the company and the CFL in terms of that information. You, as the consumer, are also the product in these situations. And yes, that can be a little bit dystopian and uncomfortable at times. I'm sympathetic to that, but it is the way of the world, and it is the way that the CFL is going to be able to survive for decades to come. And they're successfully positioning themselves to do so with this deal. It's not a newfangled idea. It's not going to take you, 2 hours and 3 lawyers to set up a subscription. DAZN's been around in Canada since 2017. I've had a subscription the entire time. It's effortless. It's painless. I forget I have it half the time. You can cancel it. You can resubscribe. You can do whatever you need to do in terms of ensuring that you're only spending the money when you want to spend the money. And they have other stuff on the platform as well, in terms of if you want to watch NFL football or NFL films, documentaries is a big reason why I subscribe, and you're going to get additional value there. So the people who balk at the price or the fact that they've got to download an app, to me, there is no reason, no excuse for it. I don't get the argument that CFL fans are older and therefore incapable of figuring out DAZN. My dad is, nearing, he was born in 1956 on Grey Cup Sunday, and he's got about 1,700 different apps on his phone. He's got more apps than me. So don't tell me because you're old, you can't figure it out. It's a part of modern society. It's going to make the league better overall. It's going to make the league more profitable overall. And that's going to mean the players are paid better, the coaches are played better, the product is better. That is good for everyone involved in the entire infrastructure of Canadian football from the top down.
Couldn't agree more, JC. And I know we'll get negative comments. That's fine. People have the right to be upset if they want to be upset. That's totally okay. For me, again, I'm not entirely unsympathetic, but I'm not that sympathetic. I think
I'm
this is
pretty
a win.
unsympathetic.
Well, fair enough.
I'm from a generation that's been told, all these troubles and this whining and complaining, just pull up your bootstraps. If only these young people would work harder. Well, anyone who doesn't know how to download an app, I'd suggest pull up your bootstraps and show some work ethic, people.
Stop buying avocados. All right, let's get into the football. CFL teams made their final training camp cuts on Saturday night, determining key position battles and shaping their Week 1 active rosters. Among the notable names released were receiver Hodge and Maier in BC, running back Mario Anderson Jr. in Saskatchewan, offensive lineman Kendall Randolph in Winnipeg, defensive lineman Kenny Onyeka in Hamilton, defensive lineman Dylan Wynn in Ottawa, offensive lineman Anthony Vandal in Toronto, and quarterback Arnaud Desjardins in Montreal. Which move surprised you the most?
There were some big names released, but there weren't a ton that truly shocked me. I think the biggest, obviously, is Dylan Wynn, but somebody that I felt already was at the end of his career, didn't really understand that signing when it happened, so wasn't shocked to see him let go. Some of the other ones, Kendall Randolph, it was clear once Jarrell Broxton signed that his time was probably numbered. Anthony Vandal, they had to get better on that offensive line. Pieces like that weren't shocking. The big one for me is I'll go off the board with linebacker Aaron Casey from the Toronto Argonauts. He has since signed with the Ottawa Redblacks by the day, just before the recording of this podcast on Monday. He's a guy who, as a rookie last season, I thought showed some real flashes, particularly as a blitzer and situational pass rusher. 6 sacks as a rookie, plus 9 special teams tackles, a bunch of defensive tackles. I thought there was something there with Casey. Admittedly, I didn't watch every snap of the Argos preseason action, but there was nothing that I was told that indicated that he was on the outs there. I know it surprised some people who follow Toronto more closely than even I do. And I think he's going to be a really good add for the Ottawa Redblacks in terms of somebody who can contribute as a depth piece on that roster immediately and do some versatile things for a team that needed to get better on defense and, lost a fantastic linebacker in Winton McManus. I just don't understand how Aaron Casey can't stick around with your football team in some capacity. I know they like Owen Goss, the rookie that did make the team, but that was the biggest surprise of the day for me.
For me, I don't know if I can call it the biggest surprise. I'd call it the biggest disappointment is Peyton Logan and same team, Toronto Argonauts. Peyton Logan, I thought, was a sensational ad for the Blue Bombers in free agency in 2025. I thought he was unbelievably electric with the ball in his hands with the Calgary Stampeders. Came in last year, got hurt in camp, and then by the time he was ready to come back, Trey Vavel had already taken that returner job and ran with it. And you're not taking Brady Oliveira out of the backfield to get Peyton Logan in there a whole heck of a lot. So it was okay. This is just a guy who needs a change of scenery, and you couldn't hope for a better place to be than the Toronto Argonauts if you're a running back looking to crack the roster. They're the only team with not only no incumbent, but no name guys really on that roster. They drafted Isaiah Smith out of Guelph with the 11th overall pick. So that's a Canadian who's on the roster. But, the point is there's a lot of potential hate to be made there. And he was cut. And that just sucks because I feel like maybe, and I can't speak for Peyton Logan, nor would I try to, but from an outsider's perspective, who's just watched him play, I'd imagine at this point that the injury has just derailed part of what made him so special. It was a serious injury. It held him out for months last year. I can't remember exactly what it was. I think it was a hip, but I'd have to double check my notes. Apologies. But it was a lower body, right? It's a quickness thing. He's a quick, agile returner, receiver out of the backfield, running back guy. And it just breaks my heart because I thought, again, he was so incredible in Calgary. the Stamps let him go, and it was like, okay, interesting. And then, yeah, he just hasn't found that spot. And he may yet get signed. He may yet get back on the field. He may yet look dynamite and electric and explosive, just like he once did. I hope, frankly, that that's the case. But it sucks, right, when a guy flashes so early and then doesn't get that opportunity, whether it's due to just a lack of reps on the field, an injury, whatever. So that was a name I was again, maybe not surprised, but I was certainly disappointed to see get cut.
I think in the case of Logan, what disappoints me most about that situation is he didn't seem to get the opportunity that most veterans are afforded in training camp, or at least in the preseason games, right? You would think Peyton Logan, with his resume and what he's shown in the flashes when he's been allowed to play offense in the Canadian Football League, specifically during his time with Calgary, would have slotted in as that presumptive number one, taking those first team reps throughout the preseason. But he was listed as low as 5 on that running back depth chart and really did not get the same level of opportunity that most veterans do. And I think he might have been able to show better, because when he was on the field, I thought he flashed at times. I didn't necessarily think that he was missing that step. Now, I wasn't at practice in training camp watching him every day, so it's entirely possible that he was showing the team in practice that he just wasn't ready to make that jump, and they liked other guys better. Fair enough. But I was expecting him to get a longer leash, a bigger look, and more opportunity. I think he's one of those guys that other teams will be interested in and should look at bringing in the near future, particularly if you've got an injury at running back or returner. Another one of those is Hergy Mayala, who I think for all intents and purposes earned a job with the BC Lions, but unfortunately, so did every other Canadian receiver on that roster. He just happens to be the oldest one there. Now they don't have to expose somebody like Nick Senecal, who ripped it up in the final preseason game, on the practice roster. He gets to make the active roster alongside Kieran Poissant and Nate de Montignac when he's healthy. But Mayala certainly looked great by all accounts in training camp. He's a guy at 30 years old who's had multiple 500 plus yard receiving seasons in the CFL, a former first round pick. Not going to be your number one target by any stretch of the imagination, but at some point there's going to be an injury somewhere around the league, and I think Mayala has earned another shot to seize that opportunity.
I'll also use this as a chance to plug my article. It was posted Monday morning about the 2026 CFL draft class. There were 76 players selected on draft, 74 players selected on draft day. Of those, 9 have yet to sign CFL contracts. 7 are in the NFL. 2 of them are recovering from long-term injuries, wouldn't have been able to compete in training camp anyway, and as such are kind of considered 2027 guys. I expect them to be in camps next year. So of the 65 who were drafted, signed with CFL teams, competed for a roster spot, et cetera, the number is, and you can go into the full details and see all the exact results if you check out the article. I'd encourage you to do so. But 30 of them made active rosters and 43 made practice rosters. So that is 43 of 65, about 2/3, are on CFL teams right now from that draft class. And of the others who did not make teams, 7 were sent back to school. They'll get a chance to compete next year. 14 were cut, and 1 retired before the preseason got underway. So of those 14 who were cut, we could still see some get on practice rosters elsewhere. I want to give a special shout out to 2 players, those both being out of Wilfrid Laurier. One is linebacker Josh Connors, the other fullback Sebastian Parcelidis. These 2, as 8th-round picks, made active rosters right out of camp. Connors made their active roster with the Redblacks, while Parcelidis made it with Toronto. Both, I think, pretty amazing achievements for 8th-round picks. For context, there were no 8th-round picks who made active rosters straight out of camp in 2025, though King Ambers did play 9 games and start 2 for the Redblacks. He wasn't on the active roster straight out of camp. So pretty cool to get picked in the 8th round of the CFL draft and be on the roster for week 1. Doesn't happen a lot. It happened twice this year. So good for Connors, good for Parcelidis.
I wonder, was there somebody who was really high on those two guys in the draft process, Hodge?
I think it was
A,
you.
a
Yep.
really, really smart individual who maybe raved about those two players.
Smart, but not good
Yeah,
looking.
yeah, that's true. That's a very accurate assessment. No, I'm thrilled that those two players were able to make the active roster out of training camp. Now, a lot can change, right? Guys are going to get added to the injury list. There's going to be acquisitions by different teams. Ottawa made a bunch of signings today. Does that shift where Connors fits on their roster? It's entirely possible, right? These are not set in stone as the guys who will play in week one, but an incredible accomplishment from those guys nonetheless. It should be noted there's some nuance here. Guys who are on the retired list getting sent back to school may or may not be back and make another shot at a team. Some of the guys who are released outright might return to school and come back anyway or get another shot down the line. There are injury situations. All needs to be taken into account, but certainly there's some impactful draft picks that are going to be as part of this class. The notable thing to me, Hodge, the Montreal Alouettes are the only team without a CFL draft pick on their active roster from this year. Wasn't a big fan of their class coming out. That appears to have been validated in the early going. They do have two players who made their practice roster, Shakespeare Louis and Liam Talbot, the running back out of Windsor. So we'll see if those guys can do anything for the team down the stretch. But at this point, no 2026 Alouettes draft picks on the roster.
I'll go quickly team by team. So BC had 4 players make the team. And it should be noted, like Jet Elad is going to start the year on some kind of injured list. Teams knew going into the draft he was not going to be healthy for the start of 2026. It's part of the reason he was available at pick 15. He would have otherwise, I believe, been a first round pick. But they still had 4 guys make it, including fourth rounder Nick Senecal, fifth rounder, pardon me, Nick Senecal. JC, as you astutely noted, I thought he was great in that preseason game, and I don't care that his 40 was slow. Dude can play. In Calgary, they had 2 make the roster. In Edmonton, it was 4, including fourth round pick Justin Pace, linebacker out of Queens. I thought that was a steal on draft day, and sure enough, he's made the team. Saskatchewan Roughriders had 3 players make the roster. However, one of them, 2 of them, pardon me, Dylan DeJete and Darius Bell are starting the year on injured reserve. In Winnipeg, it was 5 players made the active roster. Newer Gatkuth, and I've checked with Gatkuth, that is how you say his name, Dante Daniels, Ethan Stewart, and Brody Clark made it as a 5th rounder. Charles Elliott Boulain, pardon me, did not make the active. He's on the practice. So that's 4 players in Winnipeg. In Hamilton, it was 1, 2, 3 made the team, though Devin Cromwell, we know, will start the year on injured reserve. In Toronto, though they did, as we said, have an 8-round player on the active roster, they also have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 others. So 6 guys on the roster who made the team. Nolan Ulm will start the year, the receiver out of Eastern Washington, on injured reserve, but still on the roster. Ottawa Redblacks, of course, number 1 pick, Giordano Vaquero, made the roster as the first overall selection, though they also had 3 others, so for a total of 4, make the team, and then Montreal JC, 0, which is odd. I think the Alouettes had arguably the best Canadian depth in the CFL going into this year, which is obviously going to make it tougher for young guys to crack the roster. But 0 is a bit of an eyebrow-raising number. We'll have to wait and see if Rohan Jones, their first-round pick, currently under contract with the Los Angeles Rams, ends up coming up at some point this year.
Now, it should be noted they do have a Canadian rookie that made the roster in Jonathan Sutherland from a few drafts ago, right? Former
That's true.
first-round pick. So it's not as if they don't have any new draft picks coming in. That's also a good note for some other teams as well. There's guys like we talked about who have made the team as 50 years, or guys who were injured last season, were unable to play as rookies, that have now made active rosters across the CFL and look to make an impact in year one. Two guys that come to mind from my neck of the woods: UBC product Skylar Griffith was injured all last year as a fullback. He's going to play a ton for the Edmonton Elks. If the preseason was any indication, it looks like they have really changed their offense to make him a focal point as a blocker. And then Gavin Cokes is the sixth man right now as the offensive lineman for the Toronto Argonauts. Both of those guys were hurt through the draft process last year, fell a little bit as a result, were under the radar. Now they look poised to make impacts for their respective CFL teams. The Ottawa Redblacks have officially have a new franchise quarterback, as Ryan Dinwiddie has named Jake Maier as his starter to begin the 2026 season. The decision ends Drew Brown's 2-year tenure under center, though he will remain with the team as the backup. Is this the best decision for the Redblacks?
I mean, it's bold. I don't know if it's the best. I mean, I thought Drew Brown over the last couple of years has looked better than Jake Maier, though there have been times, like if you go back to his stint with the Calgary Stampeders, that Jake Maier has looked very good, right? So evidently Ryan Dinwiddie believes he can get the most out of Jake Maier and help him kind of reach the heights that he was at back in the day with the Calgary Stampeders. And these two do kind of have a connection. From the Stamps, Ryan Dinwiddie was already away from the team. He'd been hired as the head coach of the Toronto Argonauts by the time Maier signed, but Dinwiddie was in Calgary as the quarterback's coach when they had Jake Maier on the neg list and were kind of recruiting him to come up. So again, they haven't necessarily spent time together, but Dinwiddie has clearly had an affinity for Jake Maier and his game for a long time. This is now the first time they've had the chance to work together. And look, I mean, Jake Maier's game is always going to be somewhat limited by the fact that he simply can't move very well. He is as immobile as any quarterback in the CFL. But I mean, look, as much as mobility helps, I mean, Anthony Calvillo, I think, finished his career with 1 rushing yard, and he had 80,000 passing yards, right? Like there have been quarterbacks with limited mobility and who have still had success, including Maier early on in his career. So I'm curious to know how long the leash is for Jake Maier. I haven't seen or heard anything from Ryan Dinwiddie to that effect. Is this, oh, Jake starting week 1 and then the job is open again for week 2? Or is this, Jake can go out there and stink for 10 games straight and Drew is still not seeing the field? Like, I'm curious to know. Personally, if I was to do this, if I was Ryan Dinwiddie, I would try to have Jake Maier on a somewhat short leash. Like, I don't want him to string 2, 3, 4 bad starts together and have Drew Brown still sitting there. The money is comparable. These guys are the same age. They're both 29. So I don't think like the development factor, right? If one of them's 35, the other's 25, you could argue play the 25-year-old to help them develop and get more snaps, but they're even in that regard. And the money is relatively even, as we've reported at 3DownNation.com. So those aren't really factors. I think the factor is who's going to help us win. Evidently, Ryan Dinwiddie believes in week 1, the best player to help them win is Jake Maier when they host the Edmonton Elks on Saturday. So I don't know, JC, if I like this decision. We'll have to see. I know Maier looked great in that first preseason game. I watched him like, whew, I think he was 10 of 14, 155 yards, 2 touchdowns. If that's the Jake Maier you get, maybe we don't see Drew Brown all year. If that's not the Jake Maier you get, when do you pull the parachute and go to Drew Brown? I think it's a good question.
That's a huge question for me as well, is how much of a leash does Maier have? How cemented is this decision? Because it's worth noting, Ryan Dinwiddie made it before Drew Brown ever saw the field in game action for his offense, right? He did not play in that first preseason game where Jake Maier lit it up, and that was enough for Ryan Dinwiddie to say, no, that's our guy. Drew, you're not even going to get the opportunity to prove it should be you. And, you know, while I was not able to watch the entirety of the Redblacks' second preseason game due to the Lions playing, Drew Brown threw a couple of touchdowns. I think the stat line would suggest he looked pretty good as well in his action, admittedly against a more backup defense than what Maier had to face. But I would have expected the incumbent to get a little bit more respect, a little bit longer leash here. I think Drew Brown has shown a higher end talent than Jake Maier more recently, or than Jake Maier has, just because of what he did in 2024 in that first season as the Redblacks starter. There are flaws there. I know there are concerns overall in terms of his durability or even his toughness, some have questioned, and that can trickle down in a locker room. So maybe this is simply sending a message to a new player base with somebody like Jake Maier, who that you feel you can trust more as a leader. But I think it's a little premature. And when you make a decision like this early, it's really hard to go back to the other guy. This is going to define the first year of Dinwiddie's tenure in the nation's capital.
The 2026 CFL regular season gets underway this week, which means it's time to get off the fence. Who do you have winning the 113th Grey Cup and why?
I've got the BC Lions winning this 113th Grey Cup. And the reason why is they've got the best quarterback in the league and the best player in the league in Nathan Rourke. And I think that's going to be the ultimate equalizer, the ultimate elevator. He was a year too early when he said it's our time against Saskatchewan in the playoffs, but he is going to get his Grey Cup ring eventually, and I think it's going to be this season. Yes, there are some questions on the defensive side of the ball. I still want to see somebody emerge in that secondary. Yes, they've got an incredibly difficult road schedule to start the season. They aren't missing any home games because they're playing a couple at a temporary stadium in Kelowna, unlike the Toronto Argonauts. But there's going to be short weeks, a lot of travel, a lot of distance to be covered early on in the year. And I don't know that they'll come out of the gate flying hot, but ultimately that offense is going to be able to drag that team wherever they want to take it. And I think they will ultimately end up as the Grey Cup champions. I have them beating Hamilton in the final. I think those two teams would have a duel for the ages. I would have liked to see that last year. We didn't get to. I think we'll see it this year.
I've got the exact same winner, JC. I've got the BC Lions representing the West Division and winning the Grey Cup at McMahon Stadium in Calgary over the Montreal Alouettes. I'm a little spooked, to be honest, about how unbelievably bad the Alouettes looked in the preseason. That said, this is a veteran-laden club. They've had a great defense for years under Noel Thorpe. Almost the whole defense is back. And I think an underrated storyline is Mustafa Johnson coming back and being healthy. I think he's a game wrecker at defensive tackle. He was hurt late in 2024 and played like a little bit at the tail end of 2025, though, coming back from, I believe it was an Achilles, it takes time, right? Especially when you're trying to get your strength, your explosiveness back. And I mean, Sean Oakman was very good in that role for the Alouettes in 25. I think Mustafa Johnson can be even better. And so I've got the Alouettes out of the East. I almost picked the Ticats coming out of the East. I will say I don't think it's impossible for the Ottawa Redblacks to make it out of the East. Dare I say it's not impossible for the Toronto Argonauts to make it out of the East, right? I think all teams in the playoff, or all 9 CFL teams can make the playoffs. This is not a year where I enter ruling any teams out in week 1. There have been years like that in the past where it's like, okay, these guys, like the roster doesn't look good, and the rumor mill is that they are a disaster behind the scenes. Like this is not going to be a playoff team by any stretch of the imagination. I don't have that with any CFL teams this year. But if you're the Argonauts, if you're the Redblacks, I think there's just too much to overcome, right? That they were miles behind the top 2 teams in the East Division in 2025. I think they get way closer in 2026. I don't think they get there. And I think the schedule, as you astutely pointed out, JC, is going to be a lot for the Argonauts to overcome. 2 games in Regina, 2 games in Winnipeg, an extra game in Hamilton. Like, these are hard places to play. That's going to catch up with them. In the West, I am scared of the BC Lions secondary. I think it's a little bit old. I think losing Robert Carter Jr. to the NFL, though he could always come back, will be a problem. But I think when you look at Levi Bell, Casey Sales, and of course Matthew Betts on the defensive line, I think the pass rush is going to be good enough.
Jonah Tavai saying I'm the most forgotten man in the CFL.
Hey, Jonah Tavai was on my top 50 CFL TSN ballot, so don't yell at me. But I think the pass rush is going to be good enough that they're going to help cover for some of those issues in the secondary. And offensively, I mean, this team's going to be great. Nathan Rourke is the number one player in the Canadian Football League. No stretch of the imagination there. And he's got elite weapons around him. James Butler just had a great year. The receiving core is excellent with Keon Hatcher, Justin McInnis and company. And then the offensive line, yeah, losing Jarrell Broxton will hurt, no doubt about it. But I think they've, with especially 4 Americans up front, they're going to be able to find that right combination that works, right? If they were trying to shoehorn 3 or 4 Canadians, despite maybe not drafting really well along the offensive line in recent years, that would be a big problem. But I think because they've put so many of their eggs into Canadian baskets elsewhere on the roster, they can just kind of push and pull the Americans wherever they need to make them fit. And there are obviously always more American players available than Canadian, just because there's 10 Americans for every Canadian. So I think that the BC Lions will be the team out of the West. That said, I honestly wouldn't be shocked if any team in the West Division made the Grey Cup. I mean, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, you have to respect it. They're the incumbents. I think that the Edmonton Elks are going to be way better. I think that the Calgary Stampeders, they were maybe the team I was going to count out, but you add Jaylon Hutchings, we'll talk about it a little bit more, JC. He's, for my money, a top 5 player in the CFL. He's unbelievably dynamic. And when you pair him with Clarence Hicks, with Falarner Amalade, who's coming back off of his season-ending injury, hopefully, I think potentially even later this month, depending on who you believe coming out of Calgary, like that could be the best defensive line in the CFL. So I like all those options. And then I don't think you can count out the Blue Bombers. Like, yeah, they need to get a better season out of Zach Collaros and throwing the ball, but they've got a great running game. The defense is still number 1 in a lot of metrics, and they were the number 1 special teams team in the Canadian Football League, according to the aggregate stat that the CFL puts out. So I think we could see anybody from the West. I think you could even make the argument we could see anybody from the East. But gun to my head, I'm taking BC over Montreal right now, and I think that would be a great cup. Nathan Rourke in the Grey Cup, I think would be a great storyline for everybody. The Alouettes getting back, hopefully this time with a healthy Davis Alexander, not a one-legged Davis Alexander, I think would be a great storyline. So it's going to be fun.
It certainly is. I'll run through my standings because I went through the exercise just like you did of ranking all the teams. Like I've got records for them as well, or my estimations on where I think these teams will finish. Now, admittedly, I went through this process before Jaylon Hutchings re-signed in Calgary, and I think that does change the equation, but I will keep it as is for now, tentatively. In the West, I've got the BC Lions number 1, obviously my eventual Grey Cup champion. I think they can go 12-6. Second place, the Saskatchewan Roughriders. I have them at 11-7. They're a little bit, they'll take a step back from where they were last year, but not by a ton. I still think that's a very good football team. Number 3, this is where I can start to be convinced that I'm wrong. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers at 10-8. I think they will be an improved team this year because of what they've been able to acquire, but Zach Collaros at this stage in his career continues to scare me. If he does not play well, all bets are off. I have the Edmonton Elks in 4th place at 9-9. Now, not to spoil my East bracket, but I see that as a crossover team in this year of the playoffs. I think that they just barely sneak in there. They've added a ton of pieces. I think that will start to gel, but I still don't think their ceiling offensively in terms of their passing attack is where some other teams are, and that's going to hold them back. And then missing the playoffs this year, I have the Calgary Stampeders at 7-11. Now, I might bump this team up now that they've got Hutchings back, but I do think there are still areas where they are primed to regress. They've had some injury problems in the past. They're going to have to fix those. You know, what will Falarner Amalade look like when he gets back from injury? Reggie Begelton, when will he return? I thought they didn't look as good down the stretch last year as they did at the start of the season, and they've lost some pieces and haven't added a ton that I find super compelling. So I think that they are the prime candidate for regression in what will be a very, very competitive and hard fought West. And then in the East, the Hamilton Tiger Cats 10-8 in the number 1 spot. I like what they've got going on. Number 2, the Montreal Alouettes. I've got them at just 9-9. I think that they're going to regress a little bit as well. I think they stayed mostly stagnant in the offseason. And I think when everyone else looks like they've gotten better and you're just about the same, well, that's going to make you slightly worse. And I think they're going to be 9-9 this season. Davis Alexander can, of course, elevate that if he's fully healthy. But I have some skepticism about some other things on their roster. The Ottawa Redblacks will be improved at 8-10, but I don't necessarily trust their quarterback room enough to get them back into the playoffs, so I have them missing. And then the Toronto Argonauts are my last place team in the CFL and in the East Division. I've got them at 5-13. I could be way off on that. They could be much improved with Chad Kelly back. I just have too many questions right now about that football team and some of the decisions that they've made in the first year of this new leadership group. They might be bold choices that pay off. Right now, they leave me with more questions than answers.
Well, I think they're bold predictions. Like the Montreal Alouettes going 9-9, I think would be that's a hot take in my opinion. But I mean, would it be crazy? No, right? Like this is the Canadian Football League. Part of the reason why it's fun to cover and super fun to watch is because anything can happen, right? And I think that's why a lot of fans tune into every single game. And when it comes to predictions, I mean, and for the record, please watch for our predictions from all of our contributors. JC and I, in addition to our folks across the country, will be predicting the Grey Cup. We'll be predicting season end awards as well, MOP, Most Outstanding Canadian, Most Outstanding Defensive Player, etc. And when I went back in preparation for it and looked back at our predictions last year, there were some names where it's like, whoa, wow, yeah, what a great prediction. Like maybe it didn't come true, but if, somebody picked, so-and-so player as their breakout player of the year, it's like, wow, that aged really well. That guy totally broke out. And then there's others where it's like, who is that again? It's like, this is a terrible prediction. And I'll use myself as an example. I didn't end up doing it, but based on how he looked in the preseason and the role it looked like he was going to play in BC, I came very close to picking Jermaine Jackson as my breakout player in 2025. I didn't end up doing it. I'd have to double check, JC, what I did, but I came very close to doing it. And sure enough, he didn't really play last year and he just got cut. He's now on the street. So depending on the prediction, sometimes they age very well. Sometimes they age terribly. And in the Canadian Football League, there's always going to be some of the latter. And it's okay that they're fun to laugh at. Some of the picks that didn't maybe work out as well as some others.
I think my picks from 2025, if anyone wants to go back, may be the worst picks anyone has ever made of all time. Now, I was trying to be contrarian with some of them and put a unique spin on it. Won't be doing that again. But I went Khalil Pimpleton for MOP. That was a bad choice. And my breakout player was Devin Adams, who is no longer with the team that I wanted him to break out with. Although he does appear poised to see a lot more minutes along the Saskatchewan Roughriders defensive line. So perhaps I was simply a year too early with that one, Hodge.
My pick for the record was Derek Parrish, who I thought would go from being a solid rotational guy in Toronto to potentially being dominant. And it turns out he was just, again, a very respectable kind of rotational guy there. So I wouldn't say that he broke out. But again, there were some good picks here by some people. Some of them didn't pan out for other reasons. For instance, Andrew Hoskins, our guy at Edmonton, picked Zach Mathis to be a breakout player. Well, he didn't break out. He broke his leg. And that was obviously not anybody's fault that pick did not end up projecting well. But regardless, I think it's a fun exercise to do. It gets people talking and it gives fans, I think, an idea of different guys to watch out for. It's overwhelming to see, okay, there's 100 new players. I don't know who to watch. Well, here's a handful. And one of us picked Devin Versuk, who ended up being the most outstanding rookie nominee out of the East Division, and of course is now in the NFL. So I think that it's a fun exercise. If nothing else, some of the picks are good. Some of them you can laugh at a year later and take that for what it's worth.
Hodge, you revisited a previous article and reached out to all 9 teams for an update on season ticket renewals in light of the proposed CFL rule changes in 2027. What did you find out?
So in September, when the CFL announced all of the incoming rule changes for 2026 and 2027, which they've kind of retroactively dubbed structural changes, not rule changes, that's neither here nor there. I reached out to all the teams asking if they'd had season ticket cancellations in relation to the rules, because as anyone who has spent any time on CFL social media, in Twitter, Facebook, whatever, those various circles, you've seen a ton of comments from people being like, I've had my season tickets for 20 years and I'm canceling because I don't like these rule changes, right? And I wanted to see, because as a member of the media, it can be tough sometimes to determine, okay, the negativity, the threats that we're seeing from the public, is this one person of 10,000 who's speaking out and they represent what is actually like a really massive group? Or is this just one, for lack of a better term, loony person who's just speaking out and literally has no one else around them? But in this case, I have seen many messages from various fan bases across the country to varying levels of vitriol saying that they're not going to renew their season tickets. So I did this exercise last year, and the feedback I got was generally from fans like, well, this is a silly exercise to do now. You should do it next year when people have actually had the chance to cancel. And I went, okay, that's a fair point, because obviously, you might contact your team in September and say, I'm canceling, but you've already paid for your seats that year, right? So you may as well keep going. Well, what I learned, and half the teams, to be perfectly frank, did not answer the question at all, which I was not terribly surprised by. But we did get some really good transparency from a few teams. The BC Lions indicated that exactly 84 people canceled their season tickets, citing the rule changes as their reason for doing so. Now, for context, 5 times that canceled because of the displacement of the team from BC Place Stadium in 2026 due to the FIFA World Cup. But still, that's 84 people the BC Lions claim to have lost as season ticket holders explicitly because of the rule changes. The Saskatchewan Roughriders indicated that they had fewer than 10 people cancel as a result of the rule changes, and their season ticket numbers are up from 2025. The Calgary Stampeders said it was minimal people that they lost as season ticket holders and said that they have an increase from 2025. It's just second increase year over year in season tickets from, I think, 2015. So last 10 years, only second time it's gone up. And then the Montreal Alouettes claim they had 0 cancellations related to the rule changes. So it's interesting for a number of reasons. One is you'd think the place where people are going to be most upset about the rule changes are the most like diehard Prairie football fans. Well, that's apparently not the case. Less than 10 canceled in Saskatchewan, 84 cancel out in BC. I also think the season ticket numbers are interesting in Calgary and Saskatchewan. As much as it's good news, and I'm not trying to downplay it, you also do wonder, okay, are the season ticket numbers up because Calgary's hosting the Grey Cup? And a lot of people get season tickets during Grey Cup years that might not otherwise. Or Saskatchewan, obviously, people are coming in droves to get season tickets. This team just won a Grey Cup, right? So, I mean, it's kind of hard to separate the overall season ticket number by the rule changes and how people feel about them, which is why I explicitly asked, have you seen cancellations due to rule changes? And again, the numbers have fluctuated. Overall, it would seem cancellations due to rule changes have been pretty limited. And I fully intend on doing this exercise again in 2027 when the biggest rule changes come into effect. And I did see some people who I think hate the rule changes in their replies saying, and these were probably the same people who last year were like, well, this is premature, do it in 2026. Many of them came back and said, well, it's still premature. You have to do it in 2027 when the rule changes are really coming into effect. I even had one person say, well, this is way premature. You need to do this in 2028 once people have had a full year to see all the rule changes, which is like, okay, people are entitled to their opinions. I get that. I will say I was kind of taken aback by how unbelievably vitriolic and negative the feedback was to this article. It seemed like people who are happy with the rule changes were really upset that anybody was doing any reporting in relation to the rule changes. And it seemed like the people who hate the rule changes were really upset that there weren't thousands and thousands of people who had canceled, and seemed to be implying that teams are lying. Like, no, there have to be way more. And there were anecdotal like comments that I received from people being like, well, hold on, I have a friend in Montreal and he canceled his season tickets and he said it was because of the rule changes and the Alouettes told you it was zero. Well, fair enough. The team, we can't verify this. I'm not going to break into the offices of these teams and hack into their mainframe and check all their season ticket databases. We're just asking questions. But I still think it's a worthwhile exercise. I wish that the other half of the league's teams had answered the question. Interestingly, the Edmonton Elks didn't answer the question, but when I spoke to Chris Morris, the team's president and CEO, at length for a sit-down in March, he told me that 95% of their season tickets had been renewed for 2026, and they were way ahead on new season ticket numbers. So it seems like there's positive things happening there, but they didn't want to answer the question, at least in regards explicitly to rule changes. So reporting on this has kind of become a chore because, again, as much as I always understand there's going to be negative feedback to everything that we do, which is just part of the world, right? People can be negative. The internet skews negative, right? It's just part of the job. I was surprised at how much negative outpouring there was at this article. So I have committed to doing it for 2027, so I'm going to do it again. Maybe we'll get more transparency. Maybe we'll get less. Maybe we'll get the same. I don't know. But I'll just have to have my helmet on and be ready for how much negative pushback I apparently get.
Well, kudos to the teams that did give you transparency or at least a detailed response, because I think transparency is always better in these circumstances. And it's one of the ways in which the Canadian Football League has failed. And with everything that fans have been upset about, I think a little bit more authenticity, a little bit more transparency on all fronts would have been well served. And not to bring this back to the conversation we had off the top of the show, but, Justin Dunk sat down with Commissioner Stuart Johnston after the media rights deal. And first of all, good on Stuart Johnston for coming on for that interview and allowing himself to be asked questions. That's always a positive. But some of the answers came off a little evasive. They came off like talking points. They came off even a little bit combative at times. And that was a trend that I think we saw a little bit in the state of the league and certainly at the winter meetings as well when he made himself available to the media is, yes, it's great that you're answering questions, but if you're not portraying yourself in the right, open, transparent, authentic, understanding manner, then fans are going to have the opposite reaction to you speaking out. And that's going to be sort of a revolt or a disgust to what you have to say because they don't think that you're being truthful to them. And I think that has been a problem with the league's messaging is, they're so busy justifying actions that they don't actually want to engage with the detractors and walk through the challenges and admit that, yeah, there may be limitations here, or you may have a point on this side, right? There's a balance to be had. And I think the teams that were willing to say, yes, we've had X number of fans who have said this is a important enough issue for them that they are gone and out the door. Those are the teams that actually care about what fans have to say because they're willing to acknowledge this. And they say, hey, we'll welcome you back with open arms, but we're not going to put our heads in the sand and imagine that this isn't something that has happened. And we're going to tell you the degree to which it has happened and how it compares to other issues that our organization faces. I think that is tremendous leadership and business savvy from those handful of teams. It's now time for JC's Random Neglister, and this week we'll go to receiver Max Tomczak out of Youngstown State, who was just added to the Ottawa Redblacks neg list. Now, Hodge, if you recall that last name, Tomczak, does that ring a bell for an older man like yourself?
A little bit.
Okay, that is the nephew of 15-year NFL quarterback Mike Tomczak. That's who Max was. He actually coached Max a little bit at Youngstown State in college. Well, he signed as a UDFA with the Buffalo Bills after this year's NFL draft, but was released on May 27th and immediately added to the Redblacks neg list. He doesn't have prototypical size, is 5'8", 194 pounds, but was a two-time first-team All-Missouri Valley Conference selection in college. Second team FCS All-American, hook up over 3,000 yards receiving and 15 touchdowns in his career. He's your classic CFL overachieving slot who, can win with great hands and an understanding of space despite not having burner speed or great size. I think he's an interesting guy who could be brought in by the Redblacks down the road with a marquee pedigree from his uncle.
Let's go to Hodge's heritage moment. On this day in 2017, Winston Venable announced his retirement from the CFL. The veteran linebacker played 5 seasons with the Montreal Alouettes, earning 1 All-CFL selection. He followed general manager Jim Popp from Montreal to the Toronto Argonauts as a free agent, cashed a $35,000 signing bonus, reportedly, then retired as training camp opened. And yes, this day, 9 years ago, training camps were just opening. Instead, we're 3 days away from a regular season game. Though he's no longer with the program, Venable has since spent 5 years working as a coach and in personnel at his alma mater of Boise State. Let's get in to the 3-minute drill. All CFL defensive tackle Jaylon Hutchings has returned to Canada, signing a 3-year contract with the Calgary Stampeders. What does this mean for the hopes of a home Grey Cup in Cowtown?
It's huge for it. Jaylon Hutchings is, I think, the second best player in the CFL if he can play like he did last season. He's a difference maker for that defense. And while I've got the Stampeders missing the playoffs right now, I think this can move the needle and push them back into the postseason. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers have officially released former quarterback Terry Wilson after originally suspending him for leaving the team. Was that the right thing to do?
I mean, they were entitled to just have him on the suspended list all season. That said, if at any point he indicated he wanted to return to the team, then they probably would have just cut him anyway. So he's now free to sign with anybody. Still a free agent, but not impossible to think he does get signed somewhere. According to a report from TSN, the Edmonton Elks have lost 2 defensive linemen for the season with Achilles tears, veteran Brandon Barlow and Canadian rookie Darian Newell. How big of a blow is that?
I don't think it's going to be a huge blow to the Edmonton Elks because they have a deep defensive line rotation, but it's certainly a huge blow to these 2 players, and in particular Newell, who missed his entire would-be rookie season due to being barred from signing a contract because of a PED violation. He'll now be out of football for 2 whole years. That is very difficult for a young player to come back from. He's as dominant a player as I've ever seen coming out of U Sports at that position, but he's got an uphill climb now to get back to the top. The Saskatchewan Roughriders have unveiled the 112th Grey Cup championship rings. What did you think of the hardware?
Bling, bling. Those things are absolutely obnoxious, and that is great because that is exactly what championship rings should be. They are over the top. They are impossibly large. Why not do it, right? You won a championship, celebrate it. JC, you put together a hypothetical expansion team consisting only of players released on CFL Cutdown Day. How many games would that team win?
0 games. They would not win a single game. There's some good players on that team, but it's not deep enough, and we just don't have the quarterback. Jarek Daggy has, of course, made 4 starts in the CFL, but I don't think he's a guy who's leading you to the promised land. Alouettes quarterback Dustin Crum told Justin Dunk this offseason that he chose to sign in Montreal over an offer from the BC Lions. Was that a smart decision?
I mean, if there's one quarterback you don't want to be behind in the Canadian Football League, if you actually hope to play, it's Nathan Rourke. So I perfectly get that, right? Nathan Rourke would be a great person to learn behind, but I think Dustin Crum is at the point where he wants to play, right? He's the 4-year veteran at this point. He wants to play. So yeah, I think Montreal, with an offense that's well suited, I think, to his body type, his game, I think that's a smart decision. Former Super Bowl winning head coach and NFL broadcaster Jon Gruden accepted a box of merchandise from the BC Lions this week in a viral video and rattled off some really impressive knowledge about the franchise. I know he said Daryl Sankey instead of Darnell Sankey, but everything else was really good. Do you buy his fandom?
No! I feel like I'm telling people that Santa Claus isn't real. Jon Gruden accepts packages of merchandise from teams and then spouts facts about them that he has mostly ripped off in 10 minutes of research. I'm sure he looked at the roster, the stats from last year, and the Wikipedia page, which has all the retired numbers, and he misnamed a couple of them. Like, come on, guys, be realistic. Jon Gruden loves football. I'm sure he appreciates the CFL, but he doesn't have an eidetic memory about the history of the BC Lions. The man just did a little bit of research for his promotional video. Kenny Lawler signed a massive 3-year extension with the Hamilton Tiger Cats, which is reportedly valued at a combined $1 million. Is he really worth all that cheddar?
Yes, Kenny Lawler is worth it. If the game is on the line and you need to complete a pass and you get to pick any receiver in the Canadian Football League, there are a lot of good ones. But I know for me, I'm picking Kenny Lawler. Defensive back Devondrick Bynum has signed with the Hamilton Tiger Cats after a surprise release by the Calgary Stampeders. Is that a good fit?
I think it's a great fit. I think he upgrades that secondary and some of the question marks that they had there. I was surprised to see him let go in Calgary, but he's landed on his feet with the Tabbies. Blue Bombers head coach Mike O'Shea said that he still believes Zach Collaros is the best quarterback in the CFL. Is he delusional or just loyal?
I mean, I think undying loyalty probably always includes at least a little bit of delusion. I think this is probably just Mike O'Shea hyping up his guy because Zach Collaros is the guy in Winnipeg. And I do think that Zach is going to play better this year than he did last year. But is he the best quarterback in the Canadian Football League? Right now, I mean, he used to be, but right now the answer is no. Everybody would have Nathan Rourke in front of him. And I think there are several other quarterbacks, including Bo Levi Mitchell, Vernon Adams Jr., Davis Alexander, Trevor Harris would be in front of him. I know for me, I had 5 quarterbacks on my top 50 TSN ballot. I did not have Zach on there. So that's my ranking anyway. On that note, we thank you as always for listening to the 3DownNation podcast. Please do not forget to subscribe to our newsletter. You can do that just right at 3DownNation.com. Boom, pop in your email. All the news in your inbox for free, and you can cancel anytime. For JC Abbott, I'm John Hodge. Justin Dunk should return next week, and we'll see you then. Enjoy week 1 in the Canadian Football League, folks. We get regular season games, which is amazing. By the time we have our next full show.